Okay, so now having thought about who the stakeholders are for your event, what we're going to do is look at some of the relationships of those stakeholders. And this is a diagram that's meant to illustrate. So it looks, for example, at participants and spectators of the event, the host organisation and its community, but also co-workers, the media and the sponsors, and all those kind of incoming and outcoming expectations that feed into the event. So bearing that in mind, we need to think about who the host organisation is. Well, for you guys, that's the CPD Centre, that's Jamie's area. He is the host organisation, or that department is the host organisation. It could be anything though, from the government sector, the corporate sector, or the community sector. And this is just a kind of summary list of really some of the types of events, like civic celebrations, festivals, lifestyle events, meetings, incentives, conferences, arts festivals, sporting events, industry development, job creation, promotions, product launches, race meetings, sporting events that are ticketed, media promotions, and flower festivals. And such is the nature of our environment at the moment, I'm sure we can't look at this very easily without thinking about London 2012 and using that as a case study. And last year when I was doing this, we very much looked at the scenario around the royal wedding as well as an example. So I'm sure you can think of plenty of events in your mind when you think about what's going on around you. But you need to think about the host organisation within that. Once you've realised who the organisation is, you need to think about the community. And the community is really all about the trends and forces that will act on the wider community as a result of the event. These will often determine the operating environment of the event, along with the mood, needs and desires of the community. So a lot of, for example, London 2012 is built around regeneration of that part of East London. And how positive that regeneration really is, and the legacy it leaves behind remains to be seen long after the Olympics, and couldn't really be judged probably for another decade afterwards. But those are the sort of things we need to think about. On a smaller scale, thinking about the MVQ dinner, you need to think about what will be left behind as a sort of lasting impact from the MVQ dinner, or what lasting impact do you want to leave behind. Only sensible suggestions, please, bearing that in mind. So you must think about your host community. But also, we live in the 21st century, and we have to think about globalisation and technology within what we're doing. These are the most important factors that really impact our community at this time, and they have the power to bring what is potentially a very local event to a worldwide audience, and largely through the TV. Now, this might be less relevant for your case study, but think about all those events that are televised, all those award ceremonies that have happened in the earlier part of the year, right through to perhaps music festivals in the summer, and of course London 2012, which is the biggest event in its own right in the world, and how that has become so globalised and why it is worth so much money now is because it is so globalised. And of course you need to think about the involvement of others along the way. So for example, we've talked about the host community, and the host community at the MVQ dinner would be perhaps some of the people that are involved in the training, plus being trained at the CPD Centre at that time of the dinner. But also, are there any sponsors? Well, it has the big title of the MVQ dinner, so city and guilds are quite involved, but are they sponsors? Could you even get a sponsor to help with the event? That might be a way of generating a bit of extra money that could generate perhaps a slightly extra part to the evening of the dinner and give it an extra sort of wow impact. Is this going to get into the media? And what about your co-workers? Any participants or spectators? What about people looking on or people not involved? How could they be involved, or what message do you want to get back to them, even though you might not want them involved? So that's what you also need to think about. For example, this is actually just some of the sponsors of London 2012, and this is even 12 months out of date, so this is quite probably heavily updated, and there's a lot of logos here, I'm sure you can see, but also there's global sponsors and there are local sponsors, and that's something else you need to think about as well. The ones on the right are most definitely global sponsors, and places like EDF are actually much more local. But those are just some of the sponsors for London 2012, and you would want to think about some of the logos and sponsors for perhaps the MVQ dinner. So can you think of any events that are sponsored? Just putting your brain into gear right now and jotting down. There's quite a lot. If you just look at some of the football, is it the Carling Cup? But if you look at some racing events, they all come with some sort of company name before them now. If you look at some of the festivals, that happens as well. So just think about some of those, or even pause and go and do a little bit of research to think about who is sponsoring what events. Okay, there's also a venue you could think about here that has been sponsored. I'm sure you recognise this as what used to be called the Dome. If I now tell you what it's called, it's obvious, but I suspect you've worked that out and worked out, oh yes, it's the O2 in London, and there's actually a far better name for that now than ever as the Dome, and of course that's sponsored by O2, but there are lots of other venues that are sponsored. In terms of creating your event concept, you need to think about the 5 W's which Goldblatt put into a theory in 2005. And these are based on why is the event being held, who will be the stakeholders in the event, when will the event be held, where will the event be staged, and what is the event content or product. What I want you to do is start thinking about these 5 W's as part of your next workshop. So I've given you 20 minutes, you may not need quite that much time, or you might need all of that, to think about those 5 W's in relation to your project. Okay, and then place your responses in the wiki that I have supplied on Moodle. So crack on with that, and I will see you for the next part of the lesson.